The following program is presented to you by the Hope Channel Network.
Today we're going to introduce you to a book that has been published in 11 languages, 10 million copies sold, and you probably don't even know about it. Stay with us here on Between the Lines. Welcome to Between the Lines. Glad to have you with us today. You know, the New York Times is known for putting out a bestsellers list, and so often people are kind of guided by that to determine what knowledge they bring into their own mind and their own life. But we're going to introduce you to a book that has been translated into 11 languages and 10 million copies have been sold. Small book on the 10 Commandments. This book has just been phenomenal in its reception by Dr. Loron Wade, who's with us in our studios today.
You know, I was reading this book recently, and my brother called me, and he said, you know, a funny thing happened. I'm reading this book called The 10 Commandments. And I said, I'm reading that book too. And he was in New York City, and he said that he was walking by a security guard at a large building, and he said they were reading the 10 Commandments. So it really is everywhere, 11 languages and 10 million copies. It's so nice to talk to you about it.
Tell us how the Lord brought you to writing about the 10 Commandments.
I'm not sure how to give a complete answer to that question, but I just had this burden that it needed to be done. And I discovered that each time I would preach or talk about it, it seemed that there was a reception to it. And people seemed to appreciate understanding more what the 10 Commandments are all about, because I think kind of the popular term, you hear 10 Commandments, it sounds like something stiff and stern and old and maybe not what we really talk about today.
There was renewed interest when there was a lot of debate about should the 10 Commandments be displayed in public, should they be in schools. So it did pique people's interest. But you've taken an interesting angle on the 10 Commandments. What was it that you were hoping to reveal about the 10 Commandments in this book?
To make people think, to see how they're so up to date, how they're something that we can all relate to today, how it has to do with how we live our lives every day.
Do the 10 Commandments, do they send a message to us of a binding, restrictive life, or is it something that sets us free? Because for 10 million copies to be sold, it obviously doesn't send the message through the book that people think of when they think of the 10 Commandments.
I think that's maybe that is what makes a difference. It's a somewhat different, like a different image, different way of seeing them, how they're guidelines that can help us avoid mistakes and help us live our lives, more satisfactory lives and better.
Have you grown up as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian?
Yes, I had that great privilege, and in fact, it goes back a ways in my family.
It goes back a ways. How far does it go back?
Well, my grandfather was a young man growing up in Wisconsin back in the 1890s. He was very popular to debate, and so he belonged to a debating society. And they divided the group into two, and they decided among the topics to debate, it would be interesting to debate whether Saturday is the right day of worship or Sunday. So the two groups drew straws, and his group was the one that was chosen to debate Saturday. So he went to the local Adventist people he could find to get some documentation. And I don't know who won the debate, but afterward he decided he wanted to be an Adventist. So he began to talk to his family. His father was a Baptist preacher, and his grandparents were lifelong Baptists. And so he talked to his family about it, and pretty soon they were all in the church.
And just from that one incident, is there something about that history that kind of propels you, that kind of makes you cherish the values that you hold so dear as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian?
I think so, and I would say also that each of us receives when we're little what our parents try to give us. You know, and when they're small, well, you sort of think the way they think and so on. But at some point it has to become your own. It has to become your own. And what he did, I think everyone has to do at some point, to look at the evidence, look at the reasons why, and make your decision on this point. And I think it has been clear to succeeding generations about that.
Now, some have said that the Ten Commandments are a wonderful illustration of God's character. As you personally studied the Ten Commandments, how did you find that it revealed God, those commandments? How does it reveal God's character?
I think that's a very excellent question, and marvelous how it does, because really, if the Bible says we're God's children. What does that mean? More than anything else, it means He is setting the pattern for us. That He hasn't given us not as much genes, which I suppose He has, but more than that, the idea of transmitting His character, and the way we are to live, the way of happiness, the way of peace, and the life He wants us to have, the best kind of life we can.
Right, because people think of it as a negative, like don't do this, don't do that, but you're saying this is truly a life of peace and happiness and joy. It's just a shame He didn't put it in the positive, I guess. Maybe that'd make it easier for us to understand.
Absolutely, that's the message. Yes, instead of being a list of rules that you have to follow in order to make God happy, it's a guidelines to keep us from avoiding foolish mistakes and bringing chaos to our lives. It's a way of order, of happy living.
In spite of the fact that we have those guidelines that God has given us, and we've got these guidelines that have been talked about, people even put them out as signage in their front yards, the Ten Commandments. Why don't we really get it? Why don't we really embrace the Ten Commandments more wholeheartedly?
Maybe it's because of what you just said, the negative way that maybe some of us who believe in the Ten Commandments have gone at it this way, Hey, here's what you need to do because you've got to please God and all of this, and so we've seen it as something quite negative.
When we think about passing on this wonderful truth of the Ten Commandments, what do you think is one of the best ways to convey that, especially in a home setting?
I'm sure that the best possible way is the living it, the example, the positive, happy living, the purpose. There's this wonderful book that we've all seen called The Purpose-Driven Life, which is, I think that's, the Ten Commandments are all about that too. It's a sign of God's purpose for our lives, isn't it?
It is. And I want to thank God, really, first of all, Loron, for His putting on your heart to write this book. Because when we think about 10 million people, it's in the context of 7 billion people, that's a small number. But on the other hand, that's a lot of people contacted to get the right impacting information about the Ten Commandments. We want you to have the right view as well. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll pick it up talking with Loron Wade, the author of the Ten Commandments.
For more information about any of the books presented today on Between the Lines, visit your local Adventist Book Center or go online at www.adventistbookcenter.com. If you are interested in receiving a copy of today's book and live in the United States and Canada, call 1-800-765-6955. That's 1-800-765-6955.